Welcome to Cognitive Connections, where we're dedicated to helping you preserve and strengthen brain health at every stage of life. I'm Nandita Srikumar, the president and founder of Cognitive Connections. And as a reminder, this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to provide medical advice or diagnosis. Today, we have with us Carlyn Lenfestey. Carlyn Lenfestey is a certified dementia practitioner, caregiver coach, and licensed physical therapist who supports families navigating the realities of dementia. She offers grounded and practical guidance for caregivers who feel overwhelmed, isolated, or just unsure of what to do next. Carlyn believes dementia care doesn't have to mean doing it all alone. I'm so excited to have you on the Cognitive Connections podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm truly honored, really. Thank you.
It's an honor to have you here as well. So, with that being said, let's kind of start with the whole bigger picture
Mhm.
on why is it really so important for caregivers to prioritize their own brain health, even when their attention is really focused on someone else's needs at the same time.
Attention, I think, is the key word, right? For our brains to be able to function properly, we have to be able to focus on whatever it is that we're doing. And there's nothing more that you need focus more on when you're providing care for somebody with dementia. A
Mhm.
caregiver's role is multifaceted. So they have to have excellent memory skills to just be able to keep up with medications and appointments. They have to be able to focus and really be reactive to whatever it is that's going on around them with their person. They have to have really good emotional regulation because caregiving can be very stressful at times. And it's really important that the way they're reacting to their person is helpful and not counterproductive when they're caring. And then being able to problem solve and pivot because the reality of dementia care is no day is ever the same. Things can change minute to minute. And so your brain really has to be kind of ready to go. And when it comes to caregiving, if people aren't taking care of their own brain health, their brains aren't able to function as well either. And so all those little tasks and important pieces start to fall off, and that's where people really start to struggle. And what I do with my coaching is actually the first thing I start with. I don't dive right into the caregiving part and their routines and what's going on with the person. I go right in and I say, how are you doing? How are you taking care of yourself? What are you doing to support your health, your nutrition, your brain health, all of the things? Because it's just so important. It's really like putting on that oxygen mask first, right? We learn that every time we're on the plane, put your oxygen mask on first. And that's exactly why you need to be able to think clearly, take care of yourself before you can provide good care to somebody else.
Yeah, I think what you gave at the end was honestly such a true and great analogy to really compare a caregiver's lifestyle to. I mean, they have truly have so much on their plate. And, as much as it's important to take care of someone else's brain health, it is just as important to take care of their own brain health so that they can really continue to function on a day-to-day basis.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, and that kind of leads to our next second question on how caregiving, we already know it can be incredibly stressful. So, can you really walk us through how this chronic stress over time impacts the brain, especially in terms of memory, focus, and emotional regulation?
Sure. So our bodies are just genetically made to react to stress, right? We have that fight or flight part of our brain that deals with those stressful things that we're coming in contact with, and it's a defense mechanism. It's how we can react quickly, execute a plan, and get ourselves out of a sticky situation, right? And so it's really important to have those things. We have cortisol and we have adrenaline, all those things work together to do really good things. The problem is when you are constantly under stress, you start to form this kind of negative loop. And so what happens is you're constantly um, creating or releasing these stress hormones into your body, and they take a toll over time. In terms of we're talking about memory, for example, just to be able to focus and retrieve and store memories are all impacted there. Our emotional regulation the ability to kind of check ourselves and not be reactive, or even just in terms of things like depression. All of those stressful hormones can lead to breakdown of actual brain cells. And so we're less efficient to be able to do that. And then there was the third, oh, focus, focus. I got a little delayed there. So in terms of focusing, if we're not able to actually focus at the time and we're constantly distracted and we're um, taken away from what we're supposed to be doing, we can't formulate plans. We can't really take a broad look at what's going on, and we lose sight of how we need to move forward. And that all comes from
Yeah.
all of these neurotransmitters just kind of going awry.
Yeah, that is so true. Honestly, like keeping track of like, memory, focus, and emotional regulation, I think that really can help a caregiver really make sure that they're staying on check with their own well-being at the same time while taking care of, another individual that has some kind of neurodegenerative disease. I think that's very, very important. And, kind of going off of that, we often hear all about the basics, sleep, hydration, and physical exercise and movement. But can you really give us like an explanation on why these are so essential for caregivers' brain health and what's really happening in the brain when these areas are unfortunately neglected by sometimes by caregivers?
Yeah, exactly. You could have a whole podcast just on these things right here. So in terms of sleep, so I think a lot of times caregivers sleep is kind of a luxury, because the hours in a day and the hours that their person is awake and they're having to either take care of them when they're awake or they're trying to get things done when their person is sleeping, they think of getting rest as a luxury, and it's really not. It's actually when our
Mhm.
body is healing itself. So different stages of sleep do different things, but when it comes to actual brain health, that deep REM sleep is actually when the brain is kind of filtering out and purging itself of all of that, waste that's going on, and the toxins. And so if we're not getting that good REM sleep for the amount of time, and it's around 2 hours in a night that we really should be getting, we're not getting rid of that. And it can cause to brain fog and just kind of a buildup, and it actually can cause damage to actual cells. So that's why sleep is so important. In terms of hydration, basically, if we are dehydrated, it's almost like static in the brain, and signals can't get through when there's static going on. And so the more hydrated we are, it allows messages, signals to go from cell to cell, which helps us to think and plan and get rid of all kinds of thoughts in our brain and organize those things. And it also helps to clear some of that waste away, just keeping the cells hydrated. And then when it comes to movement, and I'm a physical therapist, so this is kind of my like nerdy wheelhouse, but I teach a lot about why it's so important for movement, not just with our people who are taken care of, but for ourselves. Gets the blood pumping. It causes a lot of good things like endorphins, get a good dopamine rush, especially when you're fighting that cortisol fight or flight. We need that balance to kind of help kind of bring us back to center. So all three of those things are really important. And if they're neglected, people are really going to start feeling it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it seems so basic, but its impacts on our brain health and our overall well-being is just so profound that, people don't really think that, oh, such a small thing could have such a big impact. But, when we start to neglect such very minimal things on our everyday life, it really does end up, building up and, causing, like you said, brain damage that could unfortunately, at the end of the day, even be irreversible. And it's amazing that you're taking steps to help with like the physical exercise part of this and really encouraging all of them to start this movement and really incorporate that into their daily activities.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when someone is constantly juggling tasks and responsibilities, such as caregivers,
Mhm.
finding time for connection or purpose can, often feel almost impossible for them. So, how do these factors support brain health, and how can caregivers realistically reconnect with both?
So connection, we're human, as human beings, we're built to be connected to other people. And so when we aren't connected, that we have a lot of negative impacts. We get things like anxiety and depression, apathy. and just kind of those neurotransmitters in our body that keep us motivated are depleted. And so the best thing we can do is just to connect. And research shows that you don't have to go out and be in a big group of people. Even just having one person to listen to you, to understand, or even just empathize, just be a sounding board to just hear you talk about what's going on, can really help to improve those neurotransmitters. Anything like pen pals, or now we have, online support groups or physical support groups that people can go to, or just calling a friend, having somebody check in, or shooting a text to either your best friend or a sibling that you're going through the same thing with. All of those things can be really helpful for caregivers so they don't feel so isolated also.
Yeah, I think it's really important for caregivers to know that, sometimes they tend to think like, oh yeah, like in like this boat all by myself, so, like stranded on an island. But in reality, there's truly like thousands and millions of individuals just like those caregivers. So I think, like you said, forming those support groups and the fact that you said we already have a lot of those,
Mhm.
online, in person, I think it's really important for essentially caregivers to kind of join one of those support groups to have a group of people where they can really relate to and know that, it's not just me that who's going through, all of these things. When the brain really knows that, the brain has other people to rely on, has other people to talk with, I think that can really improve overall brain well-being, like you said.
Mhm. Yeah, it gets those
Yeah.
serotonin
So,
going.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, so there's also a lot of pressure to really multitask as a caregiver. They're just
Mhm.
taking care of so many different things all at the same time. So,
Mhm.
can you really speak to the science of multitasking and what it actually does to the caregiver's brain over time?
Yeah, so multitasking is kind of like having a file cabinet and you are pulling one cabinet drawer out at a time and removing a file. And you can do that for a few files and you can go back and forth. But when you have every file drawer open and you've got several files that you're working through, the brain just gets overwhelmed. It gets to a point where it just can't handle that much information. It starts to make mistakes. It starts to get fatigued. It starts to kind of check out and lose its focus. And so it really is important that we take a breath and give ourselves time to slow down, not put so much pressure on the task, but the connection and the time with the person. And that helps kind of slow the brain down and prioritize what's really, really important. And it causes a lot less of that overwhelm. It's kind of like being in
Yeah,
a bowl of spaghetti and everything's all mixed up and you're just trying to make sense of it. You need to just pull one noodle out.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
so true.
Yeah.
Yeah, both the spaghetti and the file drawer analogy,
Yeah.
those are both great. I think that can really help our audience, kind of get, I almost visualize what multitasking really does to us. When we have, a bajillion things open, it's nearly impossible for us to actually be fruitful in all of the things we do. But I think, kind of taking a step back and kind of analyzing the situation and then, doing the next thing, I think that can be really, really helpful for a lot of the caregivers who I'm sure are listening to the podcast right now.
And a lot of caregivers too, it's like they're not just a primary caregiver to the person that they're caring for. We have a whole population
Mhm.
of people, the sandwich generation, they call them, that not only are they caring for maybe an older person, but they might also be caring for children. And so you add, that's a lot of multitasking. I have three kids myself. So if you've got ballet and homework and school projects and probably trying to work and get an income and also caring for somebody else, the burden of that is just so much. And so you just have to figure out a way to kind of get through each thing one at a time and be really organized in what it is that you're doing so that
Yeah.
you can kind of keep that focus.
Yeah, that is definitely so, so, so true. So, in that sense, what are some realistic friendly routines that can really be woven into, a busy caregiver's day? And how do we really move beyond the unrealistic wellness plans?
Yeah, I think realistic, right, is the big thing because it's like we can't have these pie in the sky ideas of just like going to the spa and giving ourselves a day. Like that's not realistic for most people for lots of reasons, right? Time, finances, all the things. But it
Hmm.
doesn't take a whole lot. It can just be one simple little thing like taking a break and doing some deep breathing exercises, or every morning waking up and either signing up for one of those like affirmation websites that will send you or text you an affirmation every day, or listening to some just quiet music as you start your day and get ready. Any of those things is really helpful to just kind of ground yourself and prepare yourself for the day and just take a breath and then move into it. So that's what I would do at the beginning of the day. And then just kind of as you go, keep a routine. People that you're caring for need that routine. And if we can stay on that routine with our person, it's going to be more predictable. It's going to be more peaceful and calm. And all those things will kind of help to decrease that stress on the brain throughout the day.
Yeah, I think it really goes back to, again, kind of what we were talking about earlier. Doing the little things can really have a large impact on our overall well-being and our brain health. Just doing, like you said, those small affirmations, they may seem, like so tiny, but in reality, they can really make someone's day at the beginning. And really, on that sense of, caregivers taking time for themselves, a lot of caregivers tend to sometimes feel guilty when they actually do take time for themselves. So, what advice do you have to really reframe the idea of self-care as a form of brain protection and not really like selfishness, as some people might categorize it?
Exactly. And I think so many people that I work with, that's the first thing is I feel so guilty if take a day to myself, or if I leave and go get groceries by myself, or if I XYZ, right? And I think what we have to do is there needs to be a paradigm shift where self-care is not an island, it's a part of caring. You cannot take care of somebody else. And I know these analogies all sound kind of trite sometimes, but you can't pour from an empty cup, right? And so you have to take care of yourself so that you can take care of somebody else and not in isolation of the two. And one's not more important than the other. They both have to coexist for people to be able to sustain being a caregiver. And for a lot of people, this isn't just a short amount of time. This is years, sometimes decades.
Mhm.
And to make it through that time, it takes a lot of self-reflection, just affirmation, taking time for yourself in order to be successful. It's when that doesn't happen, you start to see things fall apart. And actually, a lot of caregivers, unfortunately, do not outlive the person they're caring for,
Mm.
because of that neglect of self. And then who does it? And so that's why it's
Yeah.
also so important. Somebody has to be the person who is kind of steering the ship and keeping things on track. And that person needs that person to be well, both physically and mentally.
Yeah, I think, again, all of the analogies honestly are so, 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 so applicable. Like as you were saying, with the cup, you can't pour anything out of an empty cup. You're only pouring
No.
out air, I guess. You
Yeah.
really do need to fill your cup consistently so that, you can share half of that cup to, your other family members. But again, like you said, if there's really no water in there, you're not making anyone's lives, better if you're not able to take care of yourself. So I think really rooting the idea of self-care is really important, and that it's not just an idea of, oh no, I'm just taking time for myself and not really taking care of someone else. It should really be changed into idea that self-care not only helps me, but also the family member that I'm taking care of at the same time.
Yeah. And I think too, it's like self-care doesn't have to be separating from the person that they're caring from.
Hmm.
Including them in that self-care is actually a win-win, because the person that you're
Yeah.
caring for, all of those things that we've been talking about for brain health is good for their brains too. And it helps them function even better. Like we can't stop dementia. There's no cure. The train's left the station, but we can do things like exercise, like keeping them hydrated, like getting good sleep. All of those things are important for them. So if we can do it in unison, even better.
Yeah, that kind of actually perfectly ties into our next question on sleep, actually.
Yeah.
So, sleep is usually the first thing to go when someone's caring for another person. So, what are some simple strategies that caregivers can really use to improve their sleep quality, even during their unpredictable circumstances?
Yeah, so getting their person on a good routine is going to be very helpful in the caregiver getting their good sleep. As nighttime is kind of coming, exercising. It's good for us to get our sleep. It's great for the person that with dementia. So doing a little bit of like late afternoon activity, whether it's a walk or just putting some music on and dancing together, something like that can help people fall asleep easier. Having a very predictable routine. So we do X, Y, Z in this order. We might put soft music on. We might have some lavender or a cup of warm tea, something like that. Those sleep apps, I use Calm every night. I go to bed to either the ocean or Dune, the soundtrack, and so those things really help me, and I do it every single night like clockwork. So getting those routines, incorporating your person into it is going to help immensely.
Yeah, and the brain, the brain really loves routines at the end of the day. And it honestly doesn't just help the caregivers, if the caregiver has some kind of set routine when it goes to sleep, it can really be applied to, to the individual that the caregiver is also taking care of. So it's almost like a double win situation for both the
Mhm.
caregiver and the individual and the family member as well. And I
Yeah.
think really having that set routine can help us really navigate any kind of circumstances. Like life happens, we know that, things just turn upside down, but, having something grounded can really help give almost a sense of calmness for the brain, I believe. And it can really, help to regulate all the emotional well-being and really just help us stay on that track.
Mhm.
Yeah, so you work closely with families that are affected by dementia. So, what
Yeah.
patterns have you generally noticed when caregivers begin to neglect their own brain health and emotional well-being?
So that's when we start to see what we call burnout, right? And it's kind of that fight or flight pattern over an extended period of time that's just left neglected. And they feel a lot of resentment usually starts to happen if they haven't delegated and kind of pulled people into their world to help out when possible. Also, just because of the emotional regulation is impacted, their ability, they tend to be really short with the person that they're caring for. That's never good because the person that you're caring for usually matches your mood and your emotions. And so that can cause a ripple effect. Um, just physically feeling drained, brain fog, not feeling like getting out of bed, a lot of depression. And so over time, that just wears down on a person, and it makes it almost impossible to care. It removes their ability to be empathetic toward the person, um, and it just kind of leads to a whole host of problems. And unfortunately, a lot of times when people have reached that burnt out point, that's when you start to see a neglect of the person potentially
Mhm.
that's being cared for. Unfortunately, that's when a lot of times abuse happens. It's unintentional often, but it's a reaction to just uh, over time not taking care of themselves.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we are all human, right? But and
Mhm,
burnout is like a really, really large thing that we're seeing more and more common. But
mhm,
if we can hopefully actually be able to take care of our brain and our emotional well-being throughout the journey, it can really give a great outcome for not only the caregiver, but also for the individual that the caregiver is really taking care of.
mhm.
And in that sense, do you see a link between caregiver burnout and cognitive decline? And how can early signs be recognized and addressed really before they begin to spiral?
Absolutely. So you think we talked at the very beginning about all the things that a caregiver has to do to be able to care for the person. We talked about, managing pills and appointments and responding to stressful situations. And so when that happens and those cognitive pieces start to fall apart, the wheel falls off. I teach this a lot with people. If you think about a bike tire, and it rolls smoothly if everything is that supports that tire, those spokes, is in check. So if our memory is in check, our emotional regulation is in check, our ability to problem solve and react is in check. If one of those things starts to get out of whack, that tire doesn't roll very well. And so that's what happens. People can't function as well. It's a really good visual to be like, ooh, what part, what am I missing? What's falling apart? And why am I having such trouble? And also, it works equally for the person they're caring for. When they start to see things not working out, go back to the spokes. What's going on? Why are things kind of out of whack? And usually that will tell you why things aren't going smoothly.
Yeah, kind of just starting from going back to again the basic idea, starting from scratch and really, kind of taking a step back and seeing, what's the issue, what are things that we can address. I think that can really, really help caregivers, make sure that they aren't facing this cognitive burnout towards their caregiving journey. And really, in that sense, let's also kind of talk a little bit about support networks. So we kind of talked about what social connection really plays in protecting a caregiver's brain, but what advice do you have for those that are currently feeling isolated or even overwhelmed by the whole process?
Yeah, so I think I think people oftentimes are isolated because they just don't know how to ask for help. And on the opposite side, there are so many people who would be willing to know help. They just don't know where to start. And so, one of the things that I recommend is having a list of everything that the caregiver does. And it's not necessarily the direct physical care of the person, but the mundane things like cooking a meal or getting groceries or making sure that the lawn, excuse me, is mowed. All those things, so that when somebody says, "Let me know what I can do to help," or "How can I help?" you can say, "Ah, I've got something," and they can pull it off that list. And then it's easy. They don't have to think about it and be put on the spot because if they're already stressed out, being able to retrieve something tangible in a stressful moment isn't always easy. But having that list can really be helpful. You can, on an iPhone, we have notes or whatever type of device you have in those apps. Those work really well. Just having a file in there, even a Google Doc, just like, yeah, here it is, and being able to say, you know what, I'm not sure right now. Let me zip you this Google Doc, and you can just pick something. I don't care. Like anything would be helpful. But that usually is really good. It's a good icebreaker to just start being comfortable asking for that assistance.
Yeah, I think the list idea is honestly such a great idea. People every day, especially in such a busy lifestyle that everyone already lives in, caregiving really is just another added pressure to that. It is a lot of work for the caregiver as well, and they're probably overwhelmed. So I think having some cohesive list can really help the caregiver, kind of decrease some pressure off of, remembering all the different things that they really need help with and kind of just picking something off that list and having someone help with them. And like you said, there are so many people now being willing to help with this. There's so many emerging organizations
Yeah.
and a lot of already established ones like yourself with your amazing sections to really help these caregivers. I think it's really the idea of caregivers almost reaching out and also these different organizations just need to form that connection. And I think we're definitely seeing an increase in those connections. And I think we just need to keep that going.
And people like you just drawing attention to it and to young people. I think that's what's so inspiring too, just to young people to have empathy and awareness for other people and what's going on. I think is amazing and so needed. You guys
Yeah.
are the future.
So
I'm gonna need a caregiver. I want somebody like you.
yeah. So finally, what are one or two small but really powerful brain health habits that you
Mhm.
recommend caregivers start today, no matter how full their plate is?
I think one thing that can be very helpful, especially when somebody doesn't feel comfortable reaching out to somebody and just sharing, is journaling. It's a great way to take what's going on in the brain, and just pull it out and put it on paper and give it somewhere else to be than in here. And then to just be able to go back, later on and go, oh, I remember that. And this is how I worked through that. And to give yourself some kind of little pat on the back there. And also just to give those affirmations to yourself and writing down like, today I did the best I could, and that's good enough, whatever it might be, but something like that. So journaling is really helpful. And then just taking a breath and pausing. It doesn't have to be long. We breathe all day long. We don't think about it, but actually stopping and breathing and thinking about our breath as we're pausing and not thinking about anything else is so important. It sounds, I'm like, it's super easy. It's not actually to like quiet yourself down and allow yourself permission to do that. But if you can allow that, it is just the benefits are so important.
Yeah, I think both of the amazing tips that you've given are just truly, truly powerful. And our brain really relies on the thoughts that we feed the brain. So if we're able to, fuel those positive thoughts, positive affirmations through the journaling techniques that you were talking about, or just, kind of repeating affirmations to yourself in the morning or even in the night, really saying, I did the best I could do today. I think that can really help preserve and maintain a caregiver's brain health. And also the idea of really pausing and taking a deep breath, almost following the ideas of like meditation and really, just taking a moment for ourselves. I think that can be another powerful way to really regulate our emotional well-being and also support the growth of our brain health and empower our brain health along this whole journey.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so I totally agree. And Miss Lenfestey, I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time today to be on the Cognitive Connections podcast. It was just truly amazing to learn about your work and truly the profound impact that you have created within this whole brain health space.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to see where you go with this.
It was truly an honor to have you. And to everyone, thank you so much for listening today to the Cognitive Connections podcast. And remember to keep your brain healthy and see you next time.